Hi, it's Tim from Tim Gagnon Studio, and I wanted to invite you to join my sketchbook challenge. I've created a specific Facebook group where I'm teaching drawing lessons. We're going to start out really easy in the beginning and get more difficult as we go throughout the year. What I'm trying to do is get people to draw more. Sometimes it's hard to stick to your sketchbook. You draw on it for a week straight and then you forget about it. To join the group, just follow the link below in the video description. I figure if I give you some different exercises and some material to practice, we will all draw in our sketchbook more. So why don't you come on over and join us in the sketchbook challenge over on Facebook. Remember, the link is in the video description below. Now let's check out the first video from the series. Hey everyone, and welcome to my sketchbook challenge. This is the first video in a large series of drawing instructional videos that I'm going to be doing over the year. I'll try to do one every week. I may miss a few weeks here and there, but what I'm going to do is show you a large variety of different sketching exercises that you can do in your sketchbook. So in this first video, I'm just going to go over the materials that I use for my sketching and just a few different things on how the materials work and things like that. Then I'm going to show you the first exercise in the sketchbook challenge. Before we get started on the first exercise and going over the materials, I just want to talk about the Facebook page and what I'm going to allow for different types of posts. There's a lot of people in the group and it'd be really easy to just have everybody posting pictures constantly, but I really want to keep this focused on a progression of drawing exercises from easy to more advanced. So what I'm going to do is a few times a week I'll have a free-for-all post where I'll say, okay, go ahead and post any picture in your sketchbook that you want down below. And that's your chance to post whatever you've been working on outside of the exercises that I'm going to be showing you. What I want to do is keep the post really focused on exercises so that way people can get help on what they're working on. This summer, what I'm going to be doing is a big drawing project, and I want you guys all to be involved. I'll be sending you something to draw, and you get to send it back to me, and we'll have this great big drawing project. But I'll have a lot more on that later on, so that's something to look forward to. Whether you're a beginner or more advanced, everyone will be able to take part in the drawing project. Okay, so let's get started and talk about the materials and the first exercise for this week. Okay, first thing I want to talk about is the materials, and what I have here is a large variety of pencils and some erasers and some other tools in my sketchbooks. First thing you're going to need obviously is a sketchbook. Just a white sketchbook is really all you need in the sketchbook challenge. Even if you just did it on white computer paper and stapled them together or just kept them in a folder, that's fine too. You don't need anything too extravagant to practice your drawing skills. Also, I have a toned gray paper and a toned tan paper that I use, and you can see here these are just quick practice sketches of different facial elements. But I have the gray paper, and the toned paper allows you to experiment with different values. But we'll get to those a little bit later in the sketchbook challenge. First thing we're going to do is just start with basic white paper. Okay, and let's just talk about pencils to start out with, since that's our major tool in drawing. Your pencils will have either an H or a B next to them, or an F. An F is kind of in the middle. We're not going to really talk about the F pencils too much, at least right now. We'll probably get into that a little bit later. The H means that it's a harder lead and it will make a finer, more light line. Your B pencils are softer leads, like your 6B, 8B, make really dark lines, and they're actually, unless you sharpen it really well, they'll actually come out a little bit thicker too. But we'll talk about the sharpening stuff a little bit too later. So your H pencils, another thing that they'll do is the harder the lead, the more it will indent the paper if you put too much pressure on it. And that can be important later because once you indent the paper with the pencil, it's hard to erase that line. So just keep that in mind later on as we go. Different amounts of pressure that you apply to the brush can create different lines too, and that's what our first exercise is going to be about. What you need for the sketchbook challenge is all you really need is a 2B pencil. You can create pretty dark lines with a 2B pencil, not as dark as 6B or 8B, but you can get them pretty dark, especially if you apply a lot of pressure. And if you're lighter with your hand, you can make finer lines as well. But what I really suggest having is a range of 6H, 4H, 2H, HB, B, 2B, 4B, 6B. And an 8B would be really great as well. I'll be using an 8B sometimes in the sketching exercises. So we'll talk about the line work here in a second. That's what we're really going to focus on in the first exercise. But try to get a range of those H and B pencils. If you can't and you have just a 2B, that's fine too. We can work with that. Really all you need is one pencil and one piece of paper to do a sketch. And we'll talk about the line work here in a minute. I'm going to move these out of the way now. Some other tools that you might want to get. I really like these pencil erasers. It's actually an eraser that you sharpen, and you can hold it just like a pencil and erase really fine little spots. If you can get one of those are kind of fun to have, especially down the road when we do a little bit more complicated exercises. I have charcoal white pencils, then I have a white colored pencil. I will use the white colored pencil the most. I like Prismacolor. They have some of the best colored pencils I've ever used. So if you go with one white Prismacolor pencil, that should hold you over for a little while. I would probably get 2 or 3 if you're going to continue with the exercises, which I hope you do throughout the year. I also have here some smudging stumps or blending stumps, or people call them smudge sticks as well. What it is it's like rolled up newspaper into a point, and you can see I've used it a lot here, where you can smudge outlines and do different shading. And we'll get into more of that probably in the next couple of weeks. We're going to start out pretty simple for the first week and just introduce people to using their materials. Some other things here, we've got erasers. I like to use a kneaded eraser. It's like silly putty, and you can move it around. The more you move it around, the more you can use it. You can see the inside here hasn't been used a whole lot, so it's a lot lighter in color. This one has been used a lot, even has some of my cat hair in there. But you can see it kind of out over time, it gets a little bit harder and it turns gray like that. You can still use it, but it doesn't erase quite as well once it gets really dark like that. So a kneaded eraser, they're super cheap, but they're really effective. The thing is you can manipulate the lead so you can get into those fine points if you don't have an eraser pencil, and you can do different shapes and things like that. But that's more complicated stuff we'll do later. You can just use a regular eraser, but these don't erase quite as well. Kneaded erasers will erase way better than these, but if you only have this, that will work fine. You'll just have to work harder if you have to erase something. Compass is nice to have, especially if you want to do circles or measuring. You can measure distances if you're looking at a reference photo and you want to look at the distance between someone's eyes. You can measure that distance like that and then transfer it to your paper. So a compass is a nice tool to have. And then finally, a ruler. We'll probably do some buildings and some straight lines. We'll do perspective stuff as we go. So a ruler will come in handy as well. So that is the materials you'll need for the sketchbook. We'll probably do some charcoal stuff in a few months, but for now we're just going to stick to the graphite pencils. Okay, so now what we're going to do is get to the first exercise in the sketchbook challenge. Okay, the first couple exercises we're going to do today are going to talk about line work and just getting familiar with your pencils. Like I talked about before, the H pencils have harder lead, the B pencils have darker lead and softer lead. So what I want to do to start out with is focus on our line work and how different tools make different lines. Okay, our first few exercises today are going to focus on line work. I talked about the softness and hardness of the lead of the pencils at the beginning of the video. And this first exercise, we're just going to kind of feel out our pencils and see how they work and see how the hardness of lead affects the line work. Line work is really the basis of a good drawing. If you took two exact drawings, one with great line work and one with uniform line work, the one with great line work, ones with varying line width, darkness, shape, will have a much more powerful effect than the one that's very uniform. It's one of the things I see a lot in drawing is very uniform line work, and one way to improve really quickly is getting better at that. So the first exercise, we're going to just test out our pencils. What we're going to do is write the pencil name. We're going to start with a 6H. And how you hold the pencil isn't really that important to me. Some people say you want to hold it way out here. Some people like to use it like how they write. I prefer to hold it kind of like a paintbrush, out a little bit. Almost like I'm holding a pencil to write, but just out further from the point. That way I can kind of see what I'm doing. First thing we want to do is just write the pencil name, and then go across applying a lot of pressure, and then apply a little bit of pressure. Apply darker pressure, and then a little bit of pressure. And just kind of shimmy across and create a different varying line. What we're doing is getting familiar with what pencils make what kind of line, and what can you do, how dark can you go with each pencil. So 4H, we'll do the same thing, apply more pressure, kind of spin the pencil, get familiar with it, go light and then dark. And you can come back and reference this later. Okay, we'll go next to a 2H pencil, and again put more pressure, less pressure, more pressure, less pressure, so you can see the varying weight that you can create with the line. Next is an HB, and now you can see the lead's getting softer. It's much easier. You don't have to apply as much pressure to make a dark line, and you really have to have a light touch to make a thin line. Okay, next is B. Again, a little bit darker. How you sharpen your pencil also takes an effect on what type of line you get. If you make your pencil really, really sharp with a point, you can get really fine lines even with your 9B, 8B pencil. So we'll talk about sharpening skills later. There's different ways you can sharpen your pencil to get different types of shapes. But we'll talk about that later as we get a little bit more complicated. Next we've got a 2B pencil. I'll make my B a little bit better here. Okay, and then 4B. So just all you're doing is taking your pencils and seeing how making more pressure with the softer leads make much darker lines. And you can actually get finer lines up with your H pencils. So if you want a really dark line but you want it to be fine, you're going to be using an H pencil rather than a B, because when you apply more pressure to the B for that dark line, the line gets thicker because the lead's softer and it spreads out. Okay, and then we've got 6B. And then we'll jump right up to a 9B. So practice that pressure. You want to have some darkness, some lightness. See what it feels like to have your pencil kind of come off the paper a little bit to make those thinner lines. Next, what I want to do is take my eraser, and you want to see how hard it is to erase some of these lines. So what we're going to do is go right down through this first section here. We're going to erase So you can see when you apply a lot of pressure, it indents the paper, so it's really hard to erase. The places where you didn't apply much pressure, it's easy to erase. So keep that in mind. When you indent the paper, the lead really gets down into that paper and it's harder to erase. So sometimes when we sketch something out, we want to go light at first and make sure we've got a good overall composition before we start putting in those really dark lines. Okay, so what we did here is just a basic exercise to get familiar with the pencils, also with the eraser. The more pressure you apply to the paper, it's harder to erase. The less pressure, easier to erase. The B pencils make darker lines and thicker lines, especially when you put more pressure. The H pencils make lighter lines and thinner lines when you want to darken it up, applying more pressure. Okay, so let's get to drawing some actual objects and practice this line work. We'll talk about weight and light lines and things like that in this first exercise. For our first exercise, what I'm going to do is focus on our line work and going between different pencils. We're going to draw some leaves and we're going to do some contour drawing. Contour drawing is just drawing the outline of something. So you're observing what you're looking at and drawing the outline without too much detail. You can draw some lines within the outline as we get into more complicated contour drawing. I'll do one at the end, but for now, just focus on drawing objects and drawing their outline. What I recommend doing is going to Google and typing in single leaf in the Google images. That way you can look at different shapes of leaves. We're going to draw some leaves and we're going to practice our line work. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take just a 2B pencil, the most basic pencil, and I'm going to draw the outline of, we're going to do a contour of a leaf using just a very uniform line. Okay, so that's a very uniform line. What we want to do is practice our line work. And what I mean by that is by putting different weight in certain areas or emphasis in certain areas. If you saw that leaf drawn, it looks fine. But what you want to do is make it a little more interesting. And if you were to do a whole picture with that uniform line, it might look okay, but you can make it look even better by placing emphasis and weight in certain areas. So let's draw the same leaf. And this time, different amounts of line weight. So over here we've got, maybe it's a little bit heavier looking on this side. Okay, and then you can kind of go back in and maybe pick out a few points. But what we're trying to do here, you can see this almost indicates maybe some light is hitting on this side of the leaf. So our line work is thinner here and much more heavy on this side. Okay, let's switch to a 2H pencil. Now let's draw a leaf that maybe is on the ground. So if you come down here, curls up. Okay, that's a very uniform line. It doesn't really have a whole lot of emphasis on it. It's just kind of an outline drawing. But if you take that same 2H pencil and draw the same thing, put a little weight on the bottom of the leaf, now that leaf has a little bit more weight to the bottom of it. It's more grounded on the bottom part. So you're getting some more variation. You're getting more information from that leaf by varying your line work as much as possible. Okay, let's go to a 9B pencil. You can use an 8B or a 6B for this. Let's draw, again, a uniform leaf. We'll say it's coming down like this, and then it bends up in the front like that. Okay, that's very uniform, looks okay, but if you add better line work to it, it's maybe the line's uniform here, but now it has some weight down bottom, and especially where it crosses in front, and then maybe more weight again down here. Okay, so now you have more information. Maybe we'll make this line a little bit darker like that. So it emphasizes that this part of the leaf crosses in front of the body of the leaf, that it's bent. Okay, and what you want to do is just keep switching in between different pencils. We'll try a 4H, which is a much harder lead. Okay, let's draw a hanging leaf now. We'll say the leaf's hanging down. Just like that. Okay, very uniform line. It looks nice, it's fine, but it doesn't have a lot of information there. Now let's put a little emphasis here where there's a little bit more weight on the bottom of the leaf. It doesn't always have to work that way. Maybe where it's connected to the tree, it has more weight. Then underneath here, maybe there's some more weight. What we're doing is indicating different points of emphasis, different heaviness to the leaf. You know, leaves aren't really all that heavy, but what I'm going to have you do this week is draw different objects and practice drawing some weight on the bottom, or maybe where it's hitting the ground or touching different objects. You want to apply maybe a darker, thicker line that emphasizes that things are connected, or things are heavy, or things that are touching the ground, or, you know, or maybe you just want to put emphasis on something. Okay, I'm going to go now with just my 2B pencil again. And now I'll draw a couple leaves together. So we'll do a uniform drawing first. Okay, so there's some leaves together, pretty uniform. Let's draw that same picture now. Okay, so now we have better line work here. We've got some weight, especially where they're connected here, where they're connected here. This one is a little bit lighter, so it's more off in the distance. And those are different things you can practice with your different pencils. It's all about applying different amounts of pressure, emphasizing certain areas within your image, and trying to get as much variation in your line as possible. You want light lines, dark lines, you know, as much variety as possible. So this is a really basic exercise. What you're doing is drawing the object first in a uniform line, and then trying to make it better with variety in your line work. Different thicknesses, different darknesses, different weight, different emphasis. You can do a lot with your line, whereas you can do very little with your line as well. If it's just uniform, it looks uniform. If it has weight and variation, it looks more interesting. Okay, so your first exercise for the sketchbook challenge is to practice your line work with simple objects. Draw just contour drawings, don't worry about detail, just the outline, and practice different weights, different thicknesses, different pencils, and practice your line work. Try to get away from that really uniform line. So throughout the week you can try different objects other than leaves. Just make sure they're kind of simple. Draw contour drawings and practice your line work. If you have any questions, you can visit the Facebook group page and post your questions there. Make sure you keep your posts limited to the exercises we're doing for now, and wait for a free-for-all post to post your other sketches. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you again next week with a new exercise.
you.